Hello and welcome into a brand new Sports Hub Patriots podcast. I'm Alex Barth. He's Matt Dolloff from 98.5thesportshub.com.
Hello.
Hello. It's been a minute. I think last time we spoke was right after Mike Vrabel's introductory presser. That was almost 2 full weeks ago now. And since then, he started rounding out his staff. We have the 3 big hires, or really 2 hires and a retention that come with that: offensive coordinator, defensive coordinator, special teams coordinator. If you've missed any of it, Mike Vrabel is Mike Vrabel. I think Joe did that on the air the other night, right? Didn't he say
What?
Mike Vrabel has been hired as the offensive coordinator?
Oh, I missed that. But yeah, it's easy to get the names mixed up with the amount of guys that keep coming back here, leaving, coming back.
Yeah, so it is Josh McDaniels as Mike Vrabel's offensive coordinator. Terrell Williams will be the defensive coordinator, and then Jeremy Springer is staying on as the special teams coordinator. So I guess before we get to specifics, Dolloff, let's start here. How do you feel about your Patriots coaching staff?
He said it. He said the thing. So far I feel good. Like, people that listen to this podcast already know that I thought Mike Vrabel was the right move. I think this coaching staff needed experience, and I know that they're probably going to get some criticism. I already have for making quote unquote safe picks for these top positions on the coaching staff, but I think they sort of needed to make the safe pick. I don't think they could afford to really gamble on an unknown going into this season, especially at head coach and even offensive coordinator. I know that people wanted something a little more inspired, maybe someone that could potentially be a little more forward thinking. The cliche bright young offensive mind for offensive coordinator, but I think they made the right moves for those 2 spots. And I guess we'll see about Terrell Williams at defensive coordinator. I think that's a pretty curious pick. I know he's been in the league a long time, and he's gotten a lot of praise as a defensive line coach, but he's never been coordinator before. And so in a way, they're sort of doing the same thing they did last year with DeMarcus Covington, but this is a much more experienced coach just in terms of how long he's been in the league. And he seems pretty well respected. He's at least been in other organizations, and so he's not like a Patriots retread or someone that you feel might not be ready for the job. This feels closer to someone who's ready for that job. So I think it's good that they went with experience. And defensive coordinator was the spot where I thought they could gamble on someone who hasn't done it before, because Mike Vrabel is sort of your de facto defensive coordinator, setting the tone and setting the plan and all that on that side of the ball. But for these top 3 spots, they needed to get experience, guys that sort of, that they know what they're doing, and it's not going to blow up in their face. So I am completely okay with the top 3 spots.
So let's start, honestly, then with Terrell Williams, since I think people are probably more familiar with the other 2, or I would say the least familiar with him. 50 years old, spent over a decade at the college level, including at Purdue and Texas A&M as a defensive line coach. He was then a defensive line coach for the Raiders, the Dolphins. Mike Vrabel hired him in Tennessee in 2018, kept him in that role all the way through his tenure, did add an assistant head coach title in his last year in Tennessee in 2023. Last year, Williams was the defensive line coach and run game coordinator with the Detroit Lions. Now he comes here. And you mentioned the lack of experience, first-time play caller, all of that, like they had with Covington last year. I would just push back on a couple things. One, he is much more experienced in the NFL overall, like you mentioned, and I think that matters. The other thing is, among many missteps Gerard Mayo made last year, part of the reason you hire a guy like DeMarcus Covington is to sort of teach him and develop him in that role. But if it's not working, in theory, you hired Gerard Mayo as your head coach because of the work he did on the defensive side of the ball. And if there's a learning curve, he's going to step in and kind of take over. And he never did that. And he probably should have. So this hire tells me, more than anything else, this is Mike Vrabel's defense. And I think bringing in somebody who he's worked with, who knows how he wants things done, who knows what it should look like, things like that, can just kind of be a conduit to that. So, yeah, he'll be a first-time play caller, but if it's not working, I don't worry about Mike Vrabel, in big spots in the game, popping on the headset and being like, hey, let's do something like this here, or even if he has to take over play calling duties doing that. So Mike Vrabel's a good defensive coach. I said from the beginning, I want this to be his defense. I want him to take ownership of it. That's not to, and I don't say that to minimize Terrell Williams. I think he's a very good coach, and everything you see about the players he's coached, a positional coach, they rave about him. And you look at some of the defensive linemen he's coached and the job he's done with player development. Like, I think he's a good coach, but I just, with Mike Vrabel there kind of over his shoulder, yeah, he is a first-time play caller, but I think they have a structure where if play calling does become an issue for him, it's something they can address relatively simply.
Yeah, and like, not to scare Patriots fans, but I've sort of compared it to the Bill Belichick Matt Patricia setup when Matt Patricia was defensive coordinator here. Like, he had the greatest defensive mind in the history of the league right over his shoulder to tell him if something's not working, do this, and like make the in-game adjustments and all that.
Well, it wasn't just Patricia. He did that with the Flores. I think he did it with a lot of those guys. So that's,
and he couldn't do it with Dean Pease, so Dean Pease was out. But yeah, like just going back to that whole thing, like, I think this is where Jerod Mayo is going to be a big upgrade over, Mike Vrabel is going to be a big upgrade over Jerod Mayo. Here I go. Now I'm pulling a Joe Murray. He's a big upgrade.
We love you, Joe. Friend of the program.
Because of the in-game stuff. Like, I think he has a knack for that. And like, the reports are he's bringing Stretch, John Stryker, his in-game situation guy, to the Patriots. And Sean McVay was sort of lamenting losing him. He's like, he was a great guy to have by my side for the in-game situational stuff, sprinkling a little McVay fairy dust on him. So I like that. And so, yeah, they're gonna be in tune to the game situation and what's going on. And like, if Terrell Williams starts to, sort of fall behind in terms of the defensive game plan and the play calling and the looks that he's giving the opposing offense, Mike Vrabel is going to be there to say, hey, we need to make this adjustment, that adjustment. This isn't working. It's not going to be a situation like maybe we saw last week with Detroit, where, like, I'm not saying Dan Campbell's a bad coach or anything, but like, do you ever get in Aaron Glenn's ear and say, hey, the blitzing isn't working. We gotta try something different. So I have a lot of confidence in Mike Vrabel to do those sorts of things, which is why I like him in the head coach spot. Is that's what you need your head coach to do, is to sort of monitor the game and manage the game that sort of way. And in terms of play calling, like, you got to be over the shoulder of both coordinators, and defense is his specialty, Mike Vrabel's. And so I think that's why they can sort of afford to bring in a guy who hasn't necessarily called defensive plays before, but he is an experienced defensive coach, and he's going to be on the same page with Vrabel. I assume with Vrabel leading the way, they're going to have good game plans, and then on Sundays they'll manage the game the best way they can, and it's certainly going to look a lot better than it did last year.
I agree with that. Just while we're on the defense here, unless you have any more thoughts on Terrell Williams, staff. So we know a couple guys have already moved on. Jerry Montgomery's moved on, the defensive line coach. We still haven't heard anything about Mike Pellegrino, who I would love to see them keep and maybe develop as a future defensive coordinator. Dante Hightower, would be interesting to see if he stays around. Brian Belichick as well, if he doesn't go down to North Carolina. Any thoughts on positional coaches? And you mentioned John Stryker as well. He kind of fits in here. I thought he was a good hire, but any thoughts on positional coaches on the defensive side of the ball?
Yeah, Dante Hightower is a curious one. I mean, the inside linebackers didn't play well last year, so I think like his inexperience as a coach sort of, came to fruition there. I wonder if Vrabel gives him a little more time, and I wonder if the Crafts maybe push him in that direction to say, this is one of our guys, that sort of thing. I don't know if that's the best plan, but I'm not necessarily going to cry out if they keep Dante Hightower in the fold. Mike Pellegrino is a guy who I think has done an excellent job as cornerbacks coach, even going all the way back, like the way he's gotten the most out of the guys that they've given him. He's made Alex Austin look like a decent starter at times. And obviously Christian Gonzalez is sort of his own thing. Like, he was a first round pick, elite talent. But I think Mike Pellegrino's done a really good job, and that's a guy that they should keep around. Like Jerry Montgomery, I think that was a not a Van Pelt guy, an Elliott Wolf guy that they brought in. So I think a lot of those guys are going to be headed out the door, and like most of the defensive guys are going to be Mike Vrabel guys. I know there's not really much of a connection between Vrabel and Hightower. They didn't play together or anything like that. So I'm curious what kind of connection there is there. But I look at they interviewed Ryan Crow for the defensive coordinator spot.
Yeah,
he is the outside linebackers coach for the Dolphins. I don't know, it's if you assume that Hightower is moving on, or they're gonna reassign him or whatever. Maybe if you make him the coach of all the linebackers, maybe that could be sort of a promotion in a sense for him.
Yeah.
and you could bring him in, and that was a coordinator candidate, obviously, but like that would be a good young coach that I would have been fine in the coordinator spot. Like I said, gambling on a younger up and coming coach would have been fine at that spot. But yeah, like Mike Pellegrino is certainly a guy that I hope they keep, and like along the lines of Jeremy Springer, they kept him around, the special teams coordinator, so it's not out of the realm of possibility that they keep around guys that I think are actually doing a good job. And so Pellegrino's certainly a guy, and yeah, like I guess we got to wait and see on pretty much every other spot on the defensive staff.
Yeah, Pellegrino's the big one. And like you mentioned with Ryan Crow, maybe you make him the overall linebackers coach. Maybe with Pellegrino, you make him the defensive backs coach or pass game coordinator or some sort of title promotion like that.
Yeah, quickly. Oh, Brian Belichick was the guy I forgot.
Yeah.
He's the Belichick son that's been talked about for years as like one of those bright up and coming minds. And he's only been the safeties coach for a few years. He's sort of really been slowly biding his time. Like maybe he has a chance to move up. I still want to see, if there's a possibility that he could turn into something as an assistant coach here. And so I'm not against keeping him around too either. But like, it'll be interesting to see if he keeps his safeties coach out. Like you said, if Pellegrino is the defensive backs coach, where does that leave Brian Belichick? But like, he's been praised a lot as sort of that bright young mind. So I wonder what they're going to do with him. I wouldn't mind keeping him around in some way.
All right, we'll take let's save the big one for last. So you mentioned special teams, Jeremy Springer, he's staying. You would think Tom Quinn, who was the special teams assistant, who was Vrabel's special teams coordinator in Tennessee, you would think he's going to stay as well, probably, as that all lines up. I love this. They had their hiccups last year, but they were one of the better special teams units in the league, especially having a first-time NFL special teams coordinator. I also think Springer kind of gets it. Some of the mentality problems with the last coaching staff, you don't get that vibe from Jeremy Springer. The answer he gave that last week about handling the booze, and he said something along the lines of, these families are paying all this money to come see us. We got to give them a product that's worth it, something like that. I think he's a guy that gets the mentality of it too. Brennan Schooler, Pro Bowler, All Pro, all of that. I don't know that they were going to be able to, get a definitive upgrade. Springer's unit was solid last year, and he absolutely earned a second year.
Yeah, no, he did a good job. I think once you look at the totality of the season, the bad moments that they had were more sporadic. They were hiccups, bumps in the road, that sort of thing, blips on the radar, however you want to describe, whatever cliche you want to ascribe to it. But yeah, I thought overall he did a good job. I know the kicking game is something that they might want to look at. Joey Sly, not the most consistent kicker. Bryce Baringer, not the most consistent with his punting. But I thought the more important thing for special teams was the coverage and, like getting good coverage and good tackling and blocking schemes and not missing blocks and all those things. Those things were sort of minimal. And that was after a few years, really, of a drop-off in terms of how they covered on special teams. And so I thought he mostly sewed up those problems. And I think, he has the right attitude. I think the Brendan Schooler thing is a good, it's an indicator of a good job, of how good a job he's doing, because we already knew Brendan Schooler was a good special teams player. He turned him into an all-pro special teams player. And so I think that's a good sign of the job that Springer's doing behind the scenes. And I think his retention is a good sign that Mike Vrabel is sort of in charge of what they're doing there on the football operation, and that they're making decisions for the right reasons. They're keeping Jeremy Springer because he did a good job. He's their guy, and he's qualified, and he earned the right to keep his job. And so I'm glad that they, sort of stuck with him.
Yeah, I am too. I think that's a solid hire. They will need a new kicker, so he's going to be busy this offseason. We'll see what they do with Joey Sly. He's a pending free agent, but odds are there's going to be at least a competition here. So we'll see what happens there. Okay. Offensive coordinator. This was the big one. Mike Vrabel, defensive coach. This was the big if. Who's going to handle Drake May's development, all of that. And it is, for the third time, Josh McDaniels. I saw, that it's like a popular meme where it's like two people in a time, they get in a time machine, they get out, they're like, where are we? And they yell like, hey, they'll ask something like a question, and it's a joke about, things that are running on. Like, it used to be popular. Hey, who's the quarterback of the New England Patriots? Tom Brady. Oh, we could be in any time, right? When Brady was here for 20 years. So I saw, hey, who's the offensive coordinator of the New England Patriots? Josh McDaniels. That being said, good hire. Good hire. You get a guy that's proven, that's experienced, that is a quarterback's guy. he doesn't come without his warts, certainly, but I think a lot of the criticism of Josh McDaniels is overblown. It's not misplaced. I think it's just maybe some of the issues aren't as big of an issue as people make them out to be. The big thing for me when people talk about, well, I don't like Josh McDaniels' offensive system. What is his system? Like in what context are you talking about? Because he has shown it, he hasn't done it a lot because he had Brady for so long, but when he has had to do it, his ability to reinvent his offense and tailor it to the players he has at his disposal, specifically the quarterbacks, he's shown he can do that. The Cam Newton offense in 2020, which was installed like that. Cam Newton didn't get here until July 8th, and they had an abbreviated camp because of COVID. And they were still able to get a whole run package in for Cam Newton. We saw him evolve again with Mac Jones. I would say almost to a fault, because that year was kind of when he really picked up that screen merchant label. But you go back and look at it. All right, they had Mac Jones throwing a lot of screens. What happened the next year when they tried to have Mac Jones throw downfield more? Maybe there's a reason Josh McDaniels was calling all those screens, right? So
right.
He is a little conservative of a play caller at times. He's not good. I think he does a very good job most of the time, the vast majority of the time, letting players play to their skill sets the best. The one sort of gap there is he struggles with scheme touch players, N'Keal Harry, Jonnu Smith. Jonnu Smith is the big one because we've seen what he's doing now, that he's back in a role that's more tailored to what he does well. But besides that, even the talk about his offense being too complicated, he shouldn't be throwing Drake May into like the year 15 Tom Brady offense. That would be a mistake. I think he's smarter than that, right? Maybe they get there in time. That's the goal, is it builds up over time and it becomes more complex. But I don't think you're going to have an overly complex offense for the quarterback year one. I think you're going to it'll be somewhere between what Mac Jones did in 2021 and what Cam Newton did in 2020, something like that. But overall, yeah, he's not perfect, but for what they need to set a floor, and he sets a pretty damn good floor.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Like, I think anyone that says I don't like a system like that is the perfect response, if it's on social media. All right, tell me the system. What's the system like? I feel like most people would freeze. They'd be like, they wouldn't know what to say. But yeah, like his system, like you said, he's going to tailor to the personnel. I think anyone that thinks Josh McDaniels is going to try to force Drake May to do a certain system that's like already predetermined is wrong. I think they're going to figure out the system based on whatever personnel he has. I mean, they probably got to get him a fullback, but other than that, like they're gonna put the roster together, and then he's gonna figure out the system the best way that works for the players that he has. And I think he's gonna get more out of Pop Douglas because he's gonna use him as that traditional slot receiver. And so I think there's a good chance that you'll see Demario Douglas getting more touches than we've ever seen. I think Kendrick Bourne he tweeted about it. He's excited to have Josh McDaniels back. His best year was his first year here with Josh McDaniels running that offense, and so. Yeah, like I think he's definitely going to simplify the offense. He's not going to force Drake May to learn the Tom Brady offense. I think that's silly. He didn't do that with Mac Jones. And I think maybe the learning curve, if anything, will be verbiage and just the way he reads defenses. Like that's going to be a little different than it was with Alex Van Pelt. So that's going to be sort of something where he might have to start over and learn from scratch. But Barth, what we talked about it during the season, like one of my big complaints with Alex Van Pelt, like I thought he did a good job developing Drake May, like just fundamentally and those sorts of things, the mechanics and stuff like that. When you get to Sunday and you have to call plays and then you have to make adjustments to when the plays aren't working the way you want, and you have to call certain plays according to certain situations, he wasn't prepared for that, and he didn't call the right plays a lot of the time. Like there were so many times where it was 3rd and 5. And he's having everybody run 10, 15 yards down the field. It's like, why don't you have one guy running a simple route to the sticks, have like a little security blanket type thing? And I feel like Josh McDaniels is going to have a lot of those plays in mind. He's going to know what play to call in what situation. He's way more experienced and, adept at that than Alex Van Pelt ever was and ever would be. And I think he's going to put Drake May in a position to succeed because of those things. He's going to have those details down. He's going to have good game plans. He's going to have good game plans according to the defense and according to the situations. And so look, I think this goes back to my original argument with Vrabel. Like, I think McDaniels is good. They need to get good players. Like, I think this is still just step 2, step 3, whatever you want to order them of the offseason, where they still have to really upgrade this roster. I really hope
none of this matters. Offense, defense doesn't matter if they don't get better players.
I really hope that ownership doesn't think that they could just install this good, experienced coaching staff and they'll make it work with what they have. Like, I think they're gonna spend some money because they have all this cap space. But they spent so much last year just extending guys, and a lot of those signings turned out to be, they look like mistakes so far. And so I hope they do spend some money, at least on some high end talent at positions of need, and they give Josh McDaniels the personnel he needs to put the whole offense in position to succeed and to put Drake May in position to succeed. But Josh McDaniels in his own right, I think, is a good move, good hire. That's the kind of guy they needed. If you asked me to describe it in one word, Barth, I'd say convenient, because yes, he's good at his job. We know he's going to be good. He's not going to blow up in their face, but at the same time, he's conveniently cheap because he's getting paid by the Raiders. He's conveniently familiar. They know him very well. He's been here. This is his 3rd stint now, as you said. And so the familiarity and the affordability, like, they're going to get a great deal on him financially. That sort of makes it convenient because, he happens to be good at his job. Like, it's the sort of thing that does make me wonder if ownership is making these hires for the right reasons. Like, are they hiring Josh McDaniels because he's the best guy for the job or because he's cheap and familiar? Conveniently, he's kind of both. I think he kind of was the best man for the job, but he is also an affordable guy. And so it's hard. You don't know without it happening. But, like, if they didn't get Josh McDaniels back and they went out and got, like, Bill O'Brien or something because he's cheap and familiar, I would have hated that. But, like, that's why I'm glad they got Josh McDaniels, because yes, it helps the Crafts that he's affordable and they know him and they know what they're getting, but he's also the best man for the job. So overall, it's a convenient move, and hopefully they get him players and it all works out the way it's supposed to.
I agree with you. Like, yeah, there's probably an element of saving money here, but he's still, a very good hire. Hopefully they spend that money back to adding to the roster. Although, look, they're going to add players. They're not going to add an entire new offense. They're not going to add 10 new players around Drake May, just not in 1 year, maybe in a couple of years, but that's going to take longer than a year. So
I think even offensive line, like, people say they need 4 new offensive linemen. Well, I don't know if they're going to do that. Get a left tackle, and you can probably figure out the rest. You don't have to replace the entire line. I don't think. I think they
need a starter at left tackle, maybe a starter at left guard. You need, like, at least a very solid backup at right tackle. I would say that. But along those lines, what I was going to say is, hopefully with Josh McDaniels, you also get some more out of some of the players you currently have. So, like, as I look at it, right, some of the big winners of this in terms of Patriots players, obviously Drake May is one. I would even throw Joe Milton in there, because I don't put it past Josh McDaniels to have, like, some sort of Joe Milton package where when we talk about the Cam Newton run game, yes, Josh McDaniels can install a run game for quarterback, but it's going to look different because Drake May, he's big. He's not Cam Newton. Cam Newton's a tank, right? Cam Newton's what, like 6'5", 240, something like that. He can take hits in a way Drake May can't. Well, Joe Milton's a pretty big guy. So you want to do some of that full house QB power stuff on the goal line, and you don't want to risk Drake May. Maybe there's a package in here for Joe Milton. I think Ramondre Stevenson is a winner in this. I know people are kind of frustrated after the way it went for him last year, but I would think with Josh McDaniels, we're going back to the early down, passing down, running back dynamic, right? Where you have your Antoine Smith, Stephen Ridley, LeGarrette Blount, that sort of guy. And then you have Kevin Falk, Shane Vereen, James White as your passing down back. And I think the way they were doing it, which was just sort of either by drive or when guys were tired or whatever, Ramondre Stevenson the last 3 years got run into the ground by the end of the year. And you could see the way his play dropped off late in the season. There's a lot less risk in that when you use this sort of situational breakdown. So Stevenson can be either one. He's a pretty well-rounded back. My guess would be they use him as the early down back. And then either Antonio Gibson's your passing down back, or maybe they go into the draft, try to find somebody. But I think it benefits Stevenson. It might benefit Gibson too. Another guy I think this benefits is, and this is, we're digging a little deeper now, is, well, actually, first, let me just say Hunter Henry, because Josh McDaniels lives in some tight ends. And then the last one is digging a little deeper is City So. Because, and I'll pair this with, I had a couple guys that I think are maybe, this is detrimental to them. And that's Cole Strange and Layden Robinson, because they're going to start running power again. They're going to start running gap, and you need those big mauler guards. Yeah. Cole Strange certainly is not that. If Cole Strange is going to make it with this team at this point, it's going to have to be at center. He's not a guard with what Josh McDaniels wants to do primarily. Layden Robinson's kind of right on that line. I think he plays more powerful than his size, but he's also not the biggest guy. City So's like a big guy, right? He's more built like that typical Josh McDaniels guard. I also wonder if Josh McDaniels goes out and tries to find himself a Mike Onwenu for the left side. So I think it hurts some of those younger guards outside of City So. And obviously, I don't think it's great for Javon Baker, because he was struggling to pick the offense up last year. And look, it's not going to be as complicated as some people to make it out to be, but I think it's going to be a little more complex than last year. So if Baker couldn't pick up last year's offense, as was kind of suggested by the coaching staff, then what does that mean for this? And then with Jalen Polk, I think he can probably handle the offense, but the problem is that slot position beyond quarterback is probably the most important position in a Josh McDaniels offense. And is he going to come in and watch the tape? And I'm sure he's already done this. Watch the tape of Jalen Polk from last year and say, yeah, I'm comfortable running my offense through that guy. I would be shocked. Maybe he gets a chance to win the position, but they're at the very least going to have an incredibly capable second option. If not, just outright name somebody else the starter and Polk becomes the backup there in the slot. And that could be any number of guys, but it's probably not a great sign for Jalen Polk's development, which I know is a second round pick, but if he's not the answer, you have to cut bait. You'd rather cut bait too early than have him bog your offense down for a few weeks before you really figure it out.
Yeah, Polk. I don't see him being the slot guy, the engine of the offense. He just doesn't have the speed or the short area quickness to get open, quickly and make plays over the middle of the field in the short areas like Julian Edelman or Wes Welker were able to do. And I just think Demario Douglas, he's undersized and he's going to have trouble staying healthy if he gets hit a lot. And so maybe you do need another option there.
Douglas is not a volume guy. He's a very good player, and I'll be interested to see how McDaniels uses him, but he's not a guy that can have 120 targets over the course of a season.
Right. Yeah. I don't see him holding up with that kind of workload. And I just don't see Polk fitting that just because he just doesn't have the separation or the speed to really handle that spot. And obviously we don't know if he's even going to be able to pick up the offense in the first place. And so we'll see how that goes. I mean, look, I think the receivers were poorly coached last year. And so wide receivers coach is still unfilled. It's still unreported who they're bringing in there. And so that's going to be a big spot to watch on the coaching staff. But I don't have too much hope for the receivers. I feel like they still need to get the number one guy for sure. But they might need to get, a true slot guy, at least a guy that you could reliably put out there for an appreciable workload and at least spell Demario Douglas in those situations. But you mentioned Mike Onwenu. I think Onwenu is going to be a big winner of the McDaniels thing because of what you said. They're going to run those gap schemes and power schemes again, and I don't think Onwenu was a good fit for what Alex Van Pelt wanted to do, and I think you sort of saw that on the field. So I expect Onwenu to have a big bounce back. I think he really has to. He's their highest paid offensive lineman. He might be their second highest paid offensive lineman if they make a big move in the offseason for a left tackle or something. But they really need Onwenu to bounce back. But I do feel confident that he will with McDaniels coming in and running his sort of run schemes.
Anybody else you feel winner or loser from the McDaniels hire?
You're putting me on the spot there, Barthy. I like I said, they got to bring in a fullback, so I'm wondering what they're going to do there. But it's really like the linemen that are more for the zone schemes and the more athletic type of linemen that I think that those are the guys that they're probably going to have to replace. It's going to be interesting to see how they sort of reconfigure the offensive line. Like I said, I don't know that they're going to be able to sort of fix the whole thing in one off season as far as along the offensive line. But I'm expecting Kendrick Bourne to really be into it because he seems happy that McDaniels is back, and that was the last.
That's actually another good one. He was on 1,000-yard pace before he got COVID with McDaniels.
Yeah, and he had last time he had big consistent success was with McDaniels, and so I'm hoping I'm expecting that the guys that they brought in back in that 2021 year, the Henrys and the Bournes to really pick it back up. And, as long as they get that number one guy, like, I'm not sure that they need to like remake the entire skill group. Like, if you get that one guy that can dictate coverages and all that, I feel like everyone else could sort of slot in and you can at least make it work for a year. And like, I just think it's more important to make sure that you can protect Drake May and get him that go-to guy. And like, they don't need to remake the entire receiver and tight end room. Like, I feel like what they have is going to get a boost from McDaniels being back. They just need that talent for the top of the depth chart. And I hope they do that, but I think McDaniels is going to be good for some of the guys that they have.
And I think that's where, the real conversation now, look, we'll get to the roster building. That's coming very soon. I actually put something up this week on 98.5thesportshub.com on kind of, I didn't rank the needs this year, like exactly like one to whatever.
He did superlatives.
I did it, like categories. Like I went from not a need to, there are 5 levels from not a need to like blue chip. You got to like nail this one kind of need.
These tears.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. It's Barthy's tears. So you can check that out on 98.5thesportshub.com. So that's coming, but there is one other step here, which is positional coaches, which we talked about on defense. I think the 2 big hires are on offense. Quarterbacks coach, I'm actually not as worried about because that's basically Josh McDaniels, right? Like TC McCartney was the quarterbacks coach last year, but it was Alex Van Pelt. So it'll be interesting to see who they hire. But to me, the real impact positional coaches right now, wide receivers coach, which we've talked a ton about, and they're going to have options, right? Wes Welker, Chad O'Shea would be an interesting name. He'd worked with Mike Vrabel in Cleveland and has been on staff with Josh McDaniels in New England. No connections, but I will keep throwing out Sean Jefferson because I just think he's a hell of a coach. Same thing with Holman Wiggins, especially if they want a little bit of a college flair to that. Wiggins was the wide receivers coach at Alabama for a while when they had that run of just churning guys out left and right. He's currently at Texas A&M. And then the other one is offensive line coach, which do they try to get Carmen Bursillo away from the Giants and go back to that system? Is there somebody maybe from Tennessee? Vrabel usually had a pretty good offensive line in Tennessee. Does he try to get a coach from that tree back? But
there was a Cole Popovich was a guy who was here.
Cole Popovich would be another one. I think he's the assistant offensive line coach in Houston. Now, Houston's offensive line last year was not good. So maybe you worry about that a little bit, but I think those are the next 2 big things we're looking at.
Yeah, no, look, the way I'm looking at quarterbacks coach is like, if someone wants the cliche, the bright young offensive mind, like that's the spot. You know what I mean? And like, I know I've said it a million times already on this podcast. Like, I just think that whole bright offensive mind thing is just so overrated. And like, to steal a line from Mez, this is going up my ass right now, Barthy. This assistant quarterbacks coach from Minnesota, what's his, Grant Udinsky? Is that his name?
Yeah.
Like, they're talking about him like he's the next Sean McVay, and I don't doubt that he's a good coach, and like he obviously did something right there with Sam Darnold, but he's the assistant quarterbacks coach. He's not even the quarterbacks coach. He's 28 years old. People really wanted the Patriots to take not just Drake May, but the entire offense and turn it over to a 28-year-old who's never done the job before, who's never even been the main quarterbacks coach. Like, I would have hated that. I would have said, like, this is not going to work out, because I don't think they could afford to put a guy with that level of inexperience in that important of a spot. Like, I think they just needed experience there, and I just don't know why people are so averse to experience. And like, I know you've talked about it before, like they should try to find their Ben Johnson. Like, maybe this Grant Udinsky could be their Ben Johnson. If he can't get a coordinator job this year, maybe they could try to pry him away from Minnesota, make him the quarterbacks coach, right? He's just the assistant quarterbacks coach. All right, make him the quarterbacks coach. Like, I think that's the spot where you can sort of gamble on that young, bright, up-and-coming coach. But I think at the main spots, like, they needed someone that you already know that they know what they're doing. I'm okay to sacrifice a little bit of innovation and wow factor for a guy that just knows what he's doing. And I did not want the offensive coordinator to be a guy like Grant Udinsky, who has not even come close to doing that job. And look, maybe he's the next Sean McVay. Maybe they're missing out on the next offensive genius. I've heard this a million times, Barth, and I'm not buying on it. I didn't want this 28-year-old assistant quarterbacks coach to be the offensive coordinator of the Patriots. You want to bring him in and make the quarterbacks coach? That's fine. If they want to fill that spot with a guy,
that'd be a good hire. They'd be
if
very
they
good
want
hire.
to fill the quarterback's coach spot with a guy who's the sort of considered a rising star, that makes sense to me. You can groom him, you can bring him along, and then if Josh McDaniels, God forbid, gets another head coaching job somewhere, or he walks away, or he goes to another job.
Quick game here. What NFL team would actually hire Josh McDaniels for what I would call his fourth head coaching stint? I'm counting the Colts.
The Raiders bring him back. Tom Brady says, no, you guys don't get it. He can be a good head coach. We just got to put the right guys around him.
I have two teams that I could see hiring. If Josh McDaniels gets another head coaching job, it's going to be from one of these two teams. The Jacksonville Jaguars, sorry, Kendra Middleton, or the Dallas Cowboys. Those are the only two teams where I'm like, yeah, they'd hire Josh McDaniels. And it's nothing against Josh. Like, some guys are really good coordinators, and that's what they are. And I think that's what he is. And let's not blur the line between what he was as a head coach and as a coordinator. But you're right. Hiring Udinski as quarterback's coach make a ton of sense. Now, he might not come here because that offensive coordinator position is blocked, right? At least for the time being. And he may see that in another place he has a quicker path. But the NFL has had a coaching problem for a few years now. And I think some of it is so many of these teams are trying to find that next Sean McVay, that next tight pants guy, that they get ahead.
It's such a mind virus. I feel like it's worse than ever.
They hire an assistant head coach. They hire an assistant quarterbacks coach as an offensive coordinator. They hire a positional coach as a head coach, right? And things like that, because they're just like, well, we got to get him now while he's available.
Yeah.
And at a certain point, it was going to have to slow down in order to allow coaching development to properly happen again. I figured the teams would learn their lesson and stop hiring these guys. It's actually kind of the coaches. Think about it. Ben Johnson stayed in Detroit a year longer than he needed to. Like, if he wanted to go be a head coach last offseason, he could have. But he wanted another year of development, and he wanted to make sure he ended up in a good spot. Now, we can argue whether or not the Bears are a good spot, but they're better than any spot he would have ended up last year.
Liam Cohen is staying in Tampa.
Liam Cohen is staying.
Declined the Jaguars job.
Ton of credit to Liam Cohen. That's not a good spot right now in Jacksonville, and you only get so many shots to be a head coach. Good for him. Bobby Slowick, it didn't quite work out for, but that's another guy that had a shot last year and stayed. So hopefully, you say, it's a mind virus. It's worse than ever. I think the problem's starting to correct itself because a lot of these coaches are realizing, if I just jump for a head coaching job just to get it before I'm ready, or if I go to a bad spot or anything like that,
you can damage your own career.
Right. So I think guys are starting to realize that, which should be good for the health of the league. Now, the teams need to start being more patient with coaches and with quarterbacks, and that's a whole other conversation. But Patriots obviously didn't need to worry about that. They got an experienced veteran coach, Mike Vrabel, who probably shouldn't have been fired by the Titans to begin with. And now they've built out the staff. So there you go. We had all year kind of this segment. How do you feel about your Patriots coaching staff? And we got to turn it into an entire episode today. So that was pretty fun. Any parting thoughts here before we wrap it up?
No, I'm just interested to see what they do in that quarterback coach spot. Like, I feel like I would like it if they brought in someone who's younger, has newer ideas, someone that they could develop, as opposed to, if they bring back like Jerry Shaplinsky or something like that. Like, I wouldn't be as into that. And Josh McDaniels has, like you said, he's had both titles at the same time before, so maybe they just do that. That would have me concerned, because now I'm thinking like now they're trying to save money with that one. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see what they do in that spot. I think wide receivers, like get a guy who can at least keep the room under control. Like, that's where I might want a guy with experience. I don't want to gamble on a guy who's never done it before, like they just did with Tyler Hughes. Like, I'm still on the experience train as far as this coaching staff is concerned, but like, yeah, I'm okay with them sprinkling in a few younger guys that they can develop and see what they turn into. So yeah, it's going to be interesting to see. They still got a lot of work to do on offense in terms of coaching and personnel, and we'll have plenty to talk about in the coming weeks.
So there you go. All right, that'll do it for us here on this one. Yeah, we'll have an episode coming up. Probably, I don't want to go too long. We'll see. I got a couple ideas I'm kind of kicking around here. Matt has a couple ideas he's kicking around for episodes. We probably won't have major news for the next couple of weeks, just because, we're waiting on the combine and free agency and things like that. But we'll have some content for you coming. Make sure you don't miss it. So subscribe to the Sports Hub Patriots audio feed, wherever you get your podcasts. And also you can subscribe actually now, not just on the Sports Hub YouTube page. There is you should still subscribe to that, but there's a specific playlist just for this show within the page. So you can go find that, and you can find all the episodes of this show there. So And of course, more content on 985thesportshub.com. Until the next one, for Matt Dolloff, I'm Alex Barth. Thanks for tuning in.
Bye.